Okay, I think we're live here. Apologize for being a little bit late. I tried to get here at the right time. And, okay, audio level's good. I'll try and get, I should have adjusted my, apologize again for kind of the distortive effects of being on two cameras at the same time. And I probably want to move around my screens. Just, okay. Thank you, Russ. Oh my goodness. Okay. We'll look at that the other way. YouTube showing just 0 views. The concurrent viewers, 3. So we'll give people moments to see that I've gone live as well. I don't know if I want to really adjust too much here. That's a little bit better. Okay, and it's windy here in New Mexico. It's boy, and that didn't really cause too much of the delays or anything else. But I'll go through even what I just received this morning. Probably have to mask out some addresses and things like that. I'm still going through and muting phones, powering off electronic devices so I don't get disturbed. Oh, so okay, and I got my coffee. I probably should do my blood sugar reading as well early on, trying to take care of my health, of course. I've got my bench arranged back behind me. I'll go over those items here in a moment. And we will look things over. But how's everybody doing this morning? Okay. And still 3 concurrent viewers. Yeah, how late was I? Wow. About 20 minutes late. And I thought for a moment that I'd be up here with like a half-hour lead time and everything was going good, and that plan got wrecked pretty quick. So I want to get the ThinkPad on. I may even be able to feed the ThinkPad in with some adjustments. Okay, yeah, let's get out of the way. And I had my my wireless display that's above me. Of course, it cut out the last time. Well, it shifted position all of a sudden. And today it cut out right before the stream started too, just dropped. And so that was a little bit of a delay. Okay. And have to, okay. And so I have the card out. Yeah. I was talking to John about some pictures and things like that. I'll clear that stuff out. Some of the pictures I go through and go over. Probably there is a good. And I forgot my short Ethernet cords, although I do have enough cables to go through and even have some linked in and operating. I want to go through, let's get this switch. I go through a lot of the time on the, and pull the plug on some of the stuff just out of habit. Just if any surges or anything else would happen. Okay. I've got my, okay. So we could probably go have that. Really, there's no need for that. This is the paperwork that came with my, with one of the, yeah, the fast Ethernet card. And as we see here, I've just got the, in fact, I may have to go through, I'm surprised. Did this complain about the, we'll have to look at the, not that it's important, but we'll look at the time on my Windows 98 ThinkPad when it comes up. Just because that was so, I was having trouble before. Looks like there's even a little bit of the backlight. Okay. Well, the time is right on it, so I tend to think that the date is probably good too. Yeah. What do you know? And just probably having it plugged in and charging and things like that. So, getting to this, I've got things plugged in. I even had gone through a little bit of the initial Cisco configuration. Realize the benches are really kind of busy right now. But I learned I have my fast Ethernet card is the only one that I have in there right now. And that was a thought for the video. I could go through and I could just get this initially configured, get bridging between 16 megabit per second token ring to the fast Ethernet. And I still may, well, we may bring the machine back to this configuration as we go through and configure it. But I did, this is the old card with the handles. And when I had this running or had this plugged in to the system, it's not being recognized. I went through and reduced it to just it being on the Cisco router, of going through and changing slots. And the thought is, you know, if it had, Cisco had somehow was not supporting it when a second adapter was in place or something like that, or a better adapter, I just couldn't get this thing to register. And so I went through and I ordered another one that I have here. And in fact, I'll declutter the bench here a little bit. And this one, which I'll go through and try in a moment, doesn't have the handle on the front like the other one. And although, and not really all that dusty necessarily compared to even the other stuff I have. But I want to go through and I want to plug this one in to see if I can get this to come up on the interface. And so we may do that even before, put this in before powering it on. And I'd even like to, despite those big bulky handles coming off the front of these, when these things are racked up, and especially for pulling cards in and out, I kind of like them. And so I may go through and I may swap the actual handle, which is just these screws. You know, these aren't rivets, at least. but going through and removing those screws from the top, and of course taking off the standoffs and things like that, to go through. The thought is that having this thing inserted, you'd want to be able to get it out. I mean, I think before it was where people were prying with screwdrivers and things like that. But I wanted to go through and I want to plug this card in before that. Now, this came early. This was not expected actually till the 10th, I thought. And so midweek, I kind of reorganized and went through to just do a second part for this. And because I was going to go through, and the thought was I was going to go through and try and put this 3-COM FDDI in the NetFinity 7000, just because it's ESIA, and I wanted to kind of see if ESIA would be still recognized enough on that for Windows 2000. So this is kind of it'd be neat on the system, but we'll have to find out if it's going to be recognized. And I did find a second version of this adapter as well. Like I say, masking out. Let's do a little bit of an unboxing early. I'll mask out my address and things like that, but I want to open this because this was actually going to be, they said eBay was saying the 5th, and I looked it up and it was in Dallas yesterday. I thought, great, if I receive it by Friday, I could go through and I'll have a backup at least. And this thing's kind of interesting too for all that of the boxed up. Okay, I'll probably have to get rid of mask the paper. Okay, so really good packing by that eBay seller. Includes a slip in here. Okay. And a lot of these live streams are getting deflected. I'm supposed to be going over the Cisco, the bridging, and even answered a David Bombal post on LinkedIn. Of course, he has a bigger YouTube presence. That's one of the security professionals. Really good guy to watch on YouTube. And he's talking about an Ethernet on LinkedIn. He's showing an Ethernet to Ethernet bridge. And he responded, well, if you still have seen one of these, comment, but tell me how old you are. And I did a comment back and said, yeah, I'm looking at maybe a token ring to Ethernet bridge being a little bit more dated. So this is a new old stock, same version as this. I did it for the fact that it's got the documentation, and like a lot of my other FDDI network adapters, has that new old stock and the packaging and the drivers and all that. Now, the drivers, of course, are going to be older. It's also got diskettes. Even a 5 1/4 diskette. So we're going to go through and we're going to, of course, archive these. And these will have also the config file. They should have the config file because it's an ESIA adapter. And the config files for ESIA are, especially working with the older OS level, DOS and things like that, or just the system BIOS in general, getting it to recognize the ESA adapter. That config file is critical, just like an ADF under microchannel. And so we can go through and look at that booklet. But I thought, for the fact of this being a new version or a new old stock version, these boards look otherwise identical. I do see one that's socketed. Pulling out the anesthetic bag. I want to make sure I'm not having as many sparks, amazingly, for being kind of as dry and cold as it is to generate the electrostatic discharge. And the winds, especially blowing over things, can really work up a static charge. And of course, the transceiver differs on these, as we saw as we worked through the other adapters. I do see that one of these is socketed for, there's typically they were going through and the MAC addresses even are encoded on a little serial chip. That may be some microcode or some other form of something soldered in place on this adapter. And these are the amazing thing was that I looked through and I didn't remember the 3COM part number, but and even this, this link-F, I didn't really have, this is my original board. And I had to look through the video to determine, to try and figure out what the 3COM part number was for these. And it's actually what that 3C, and it's marked as a 770 for the FCC ID. Although I think these are the 3C771 is actually the adapter level. Now this does have, and interesting for all that, there are differences. And of course, this is not a, in this form, this just doesn't have any, doesn't have a sidecar for the redundant ring. And you can see that it's got the header here, just a simple 5-pin header. The other headers are unpopulated, the space up here, even to the point where on this other card, it has a socketed chip that's programmed for something, has some code on it, and then it has these headers, the additional headers, that P14 header. In addition, from that 5-pin header here, and then there's even a bigger header, and this is probably a link to the sidecar or some other thought, and then it's got even that jumper there, and that section is not even populated on my adapter here. Now this is, let's see if they have the same FCC. This was identified on eBay, and I'll have to look on the box, but it was marked as a 3C771. And this actually came in this morning, right before I headed up this way. So I thought, yeah, it'd be great to pack that along. That if it had just, I don't know if I would have cut things down to the wire to still have this as a topic for the live stream. And look at me, I'm going through and deciding what's the topic for the live stream. I'm focusing more on something that I didn't have as a topic. These FDDI cards are the one coming out. Yeah, this is marked as a 3C771. And I wanted to briefly look through the booklet for the just to see on. I searched around and I found drivers for the Windows NT, and I was seeing at least the 3.51 OS. But when Windows 2000, that's going to be the interesting thing. I would hope that the Windows 2000 just be a recognition from the OS that I wouldn't even have to necessarily have the config files. Although Windows 2000, of course, it stripped out microchannel and supposedly ESIA as well, with as it's going through the beta versions and the final release of Windows 2000, like I'm running on my NetFendi 7000, should not have, of course, microchannel support or ESIA, but we'll find out. And if it doesn't, that's fine. We can go back to those PCI IBM FDDI adapters. And so they talk about run the local ASA configuration utility, the diagnostic test, installing the adapter in the host. So we have alternatives. We could even, ironically, we could go back to even the ISA IBM adapter in there. I have a lot more of the PCI adapters. I'd probably put the PCI adapter in there for just, they're all the same, supposed to be the same relative performance. But, it's going to be interesting to whether, okay, so this is showing, okay. So the shielded Twisted-Pair, and you could take over. It has that that module there that you could take this over to being over copper. They say copper for the electrical side, or fiber, optical fiber. And both of my adapters, it'd be nice to get one of these modules that would be a copper transceiver. Although, for all that, for going 100 megabit per second, really in the notion of having a network of FDDI, which I would hope to be able to set up, you all want relatively uniform FDDI adapters. There's going to be some kind of switch for these. I've got to say this more. I've seen boards that you insert into equipment that provide that FDDI switch. And then the patch cords out there, and the patch cords seem to be about $30 to $40 on eBay, or even higher, for just little short segments of 3 foot, 4 foot, and that's probably just a non-standard connection that they have. The header that the industry has gone to, the smaller fiber connectors. Yeah, they show how to swap the module, whether it's copper, whether it's fiber. Okay. And whether this would come into any use, I mean, whether it even mention up to the, there's a 3Com diagnostic, which should be kind of interesting to run through from the diskette when I get into showing these. Okay, so there we have. So it talks about the DOS. Okay, Novell. Okay, installing the network drivers. Novell NetWare. IBM OS2 EE LAN driver. Okay. And the command line switches. I was seeing, so it's, okay, so it's talking about NetWare. The page that I saw, there's running with Windows 3.1. And of course, the thought now with this new old stock adapter that I have those drivers on diskette. I've got everything to set up under that older environment. And the going through and talking about connecting to the network, and we see very similar things there. This is not FDDI. It's not necessarily token ring based, but it's a very similar thing to that as far as the ring setup, and we have the same concepts of the ring connection, and also talking about the sidecars, the redundant ring. So even the troubleshooting level. So field replacement transceiver module. The thought was that these, being fiber, these things can wear out basically, or they can break. They can go through to where they go out, where you'd have to change out a transceiver. Okay, and external loopback plugs, and that's the one thing I didn't go over. Okay, and that's talking about the electrical side of the loopback plug. The one thing I didn't show with the adapters, and I had the presence of mind to leave it in close to the bench as I went through and organized and moved some stuff out this morning. I didn't go over the IBM versions. I don't know when I picked these up, they go through, and it's like this is like a loopback plug. I'm sure I have instructions somewhere on the use of these. It's got the patent identifier, but this would be like a diagnostic of plugging it into and having a loopback adapter for these. So I don't think these were included with like the IBM ISA FDDI adapter, but I've got those. So let's go through. I do have the anti-static bag. Of course, the one that the adapter came with, but let's go through and I went through on the Windows 98 system. I had a hard time with a more modern system going through and having it where it charged up. So I just went through and I was able to do the Windows 98 here, and I was able to do hyperterminal, of course, and I saved a session away that I want to go through and get that started up. I have the console cable link in from the ThinkPad. It's prompting me whether to install a modem or not, and that's the irony is I'm using the direct console cable. I don't need to go through and do a modem. There may be a switch that I can run later on, or a way I can configure the hyperterminal to go through and not prompt me for a modem. Let's go through, and I'll go down to this lower slot. Now I've got these Ethernet cables plugged in right now. I went through and I had put an IP. I've got to reset the register on the Cisco console to, or the Cisco router to go through to save the configuration after I'm finished with it. I've gone through, I've broken into the machine, went through, and you have to go through and write a particular configuration register. And see, that's what my worry is getting this adapter in here and being able to extract it. And even, okay, it's got a seat on the bus connector. And these screws, they do take it to where they ensure that you're fully seated in that internal bus connector. And I saved away the initial configuration of this Cisco router after I cracked into it. There's not really any need for me to save that away. I never learned or went through and basically reset the there'd be no need for me to retain that configuration. Even going through and breaking the password and things like that, being that I have all new cards on this unit. Now, I do have, okay. And the other thing I did too is I pulled the DC supply and I put the block up back in place. I mean, I could go through and rotate the router around, but I pulled that DC supply out of there just so I wouldn't get all the warnings about it not being plugged in for power. Okay, so we're getting display up on the screen. Okay. Okay, just looking through all the initial runtime. So the way I've got it programmed now is that you want to run the initial configuration dialog. And yes, we are. Now, it has it bracketed for the choices, and it does not have a default selection for this, as far as I was able to determine. I watched a couple of short videos just to go through being able to crack in. The basic management setup, we're going to say yes for that as well, just to see the initial screen. So the host name, I was calling this before Cisco Bridge. Okay. Now it's going through and talking about the enable secret. I'm just going to do as Cisco, lowercase letters. Talks about the older setup. And I'm just going to go through and say Cisco old. And then the virtual terminal password. And I don't know really for these on necessarily how much of these that the old Cisco and the Cisco terminal password would necessarily be used. I definitely do want to remote into this. I I had gone through and I'd set up this cable into the main interface of the router, and this has the default for yes for the SNMP, and really at this time we're going to say no for that. There's a later point that we might configure that just for the network monitoring aspects. Okay, so here, and it's really the same thing here. That is why I'm worried, is that we have, I'm going to zoom out. Wish I had a way to zoom. Okay. Without necessarily bumping my camera. But we have the gigabit 00, and that's on the frame of the Cisco router. That is with the copper connector next to the SFP. I'm actually plugged into the gigabit 0/1 that's over the top of it. These are marked with labels, of course, on the router itself. And then it says fast Ethernet 1/0. So this is in the first card position that the it is so that first identifier of the number is 1. If it were the second card position, that would be 2, 3, 4. And then the interface of that is they're defining that it's in the 0 position, or the first interface, 0 numbering start. So the fast Ethernet 1/0 is this card that I had in there previously, of course, that is that I'm going to use for the bridge from 16 megabit to a token ring to the 100 megabit per second Ethernet. This card, and it has the token ring 1/0, so it has the token ring interface as well. Okay. And so this second, the token ring adapter, and I'll bet it's just where the support has been pulled for that, for this older interface with just the regular 100 megabit per, the 10 megabit per second has been pulled for the thought that this adapter supplements that or replaces that. Now, the thought is I could go through, I could get a second one of these fast Ethernet cards. Just have 2 of these in the adapter, one for doing the 4 megabit per second token ring bridge, one for doing the 16 megabit token ring bridge. As I wanted to do, I wanted to have cards, and I mean, maybe even down the road, getting a router that goes through and can support these cards. But that is probably telling me, and there is a light, I was prompted before of whether there was lights that were blinking or whatever else. There is the, I'd have to even look at this adapter here. And even as this shows, without the handle, this may have a router that plugged into router level, even though it physically fits, it's not supported. Now, the light that's on is amazingly for the activity light. It actually has the, I want to make sure that all the order and everything else of, all the LEDs are basically the same. The only difference is this has the handle on this frame, but it has the activity LED lit. But just seemingly not, at least in this initial interface configuration, which it should show. Now I want to go through and use the, and before I was typing out, I tried to figure out the abbreviations for these interfaces, and I'm not real. It was giving me some feedback of some errors and stuff like that. So I'm just actually specifying that I'm using the gigabit 0/1 interface as a management. And this really goes with the other thought that this is the gigabit speed, and this would be what I'd use, what I have connected to my network for the management of this. And even the notion that as my networks are, the management interface being on its own separate network. So I have all my network gear, even though it services the LAN and can have wireless access points. I have a security level that I have a separate VLAN for network management that I trunk in with the other VLANs between my equipment, managed switches, that even the device on the local network will not be able to see the management interface of the devices, of the network equipment that it's attached to, because that's on a separate VLAN. So that's the idea, that I would, this cable for the management interface being on the network, I could even remote into this unit using the IP that I'll go through and set up as well. And I had to pull out my network spreadsheet last weekend as well to go through and figure out what IP schema I would go through and use. Now this goes through to, in this level, the IP is specified different from this on a different prompt from the subnet mask. So it's just asking me for the IP right now. And I think I've got the scheme that I want to do. Oh, okay. It's asking prompted the yes, and yes is the default. So, okay, IP address. So I actually got ahead of myself. Is asking me whether I wanted to configure the IP address of that interface. I said yes, and so there it's the subnet mask, and just a standard subnet for what ultimately would be my management interface. Okay, so it went through and scrolled, and I want to, we could have it go through and show. Okay. So it's just shown the basic setup. We've renamed the host name. The interfaces otherwise are shut down, and it is still only identifying that fast Ethernet. It's only identifying this in card slot 0. Excuse me, or 1. It's not identifying the in the slot 2 at all. This adapter. I went through, and in my troubleshooting, I had only installed this adapter, and it went through. It would not recognize any slot I would try. So I'll bet you just the support has gone away. For this to light up the same way, I'm assuming that these adapters still work, but it's not It's not recognizing no adapter. I thought it'd be a little tricky with where I could go through the adapters being different, that I could use this for the 4 megabit token ring to the 10 megabit per second Ethernet. And that would distinguish the way I had between my bridging that I would do. But as it is, it looks like I'll just get a second one of these cards to go through and keep these other cards for going through and whatever equipment level, the older level, would support these. And it's interesting because I don't know which, when I had the other Cisco 3845 that I bought the token ring adapter for it, maybe I even got the older adapter, and despite all that, you know, I never was able to power it up. Both had DC power supplies, but I wonder if I would have gotten to the point of using this older adapter and trying to have things working, and it would have not registered or created confusion. And at least we're able to distinguish a little bit of that confusion, that, or for now, understanding that these adapters do not seem to work on the Cisco 3845, at least for the iOS version that I have installed on this, which also is kind of a little bit reassuring, because this almost is just a newer iOS that's loaded on the Cisco router and things like that. The prospect of getting a second one of these adapters to do the bridging for the different token ring speed, because again, you can't have 16 megabit per second and 4 megabit per second token ring devices on the same physical connection. You cannot have them connected to the same MAW. It's not like Ethernet, where you can have that different in link speeds between 10 megabit per second, 100 megabit per second, and even the gigabit, all connected into like a gigabit switch, and those adapters link up for the speed that they're rated at. So, I mean, this card is seated for all that. The thing I even thought about was going through and doing WIC adapters, because those should still be supported from, and what I may do it here is just on how that identifies things. Now, it talks about for the prompt. Now, I'm 0 is go back to the iOS command prompt without saving this config. Return back to the setup without saving this config is number 1. And number 2 is save this configuration to NVRAM and exit. Now, I want to save the configuration. I don't think it was for all that. It goes through and building configuration, and I'm not really sure if I had to write back to that register again, whether it's not intuitive enough that the for these to save, ultimately to save the configuration. Now, the all the prompting that we saw there, and I'd also last weekend I went through and I set the time, which it's reset to that earlier time and date, which is not really, I don't want to worry about the time and date right now, the way I'm stumbling through. Now, it's interesting here, I'm seeing, I'll zoom in on this, because I'll do a show config, even if it doesn't save this configuration. And I thought I had where I was prompted last weekend by someone that was very observing the screens better than I was, that that they had thought that they saw this register, the older card, once the system had gone through and booted. And I see on this, it's interesting to see, interface token ring. Okay, that's still 1/0. Excuse me. So that's still talking about that first card. Let's go through and let's do. So we're at the Cisco bridge. We're going to do enable our Cisco enable password. Cisco bridge. We're going to go through and we're going to show the configuration. So we're going to do show run. Okay. And it does per screens of information. And of course it has no IP routing. I'll go over the IP routing thought in a moment here as well. Okay, so it has the gigabit interfaces that are, like I say, are on the frame, then fast Ethernet 1/0 and token ring 1/0. And that's that card that we know works, but we don't have any other interfaces listed. So that's just really interesting for all that, for how the old card is not, again, going through and trying to zoom out just the way that my camera's positioned here. Okay, of going through to where it's not showing still anything to the interface of that card, only showing this one. Now, I'm going to go through. There's a method to my madness here. I'm not really necessarily worried about the configuration. We'll get into that. But I want to go through and I want to do, this is a, there's one of the ones I have that has those WIC cards. This is purely for the 2W card, so it's got the dual WIC. We could go through and we could make sure that is recognized from that sense. But I wanted to go through, and the thought was doing all the WIC cards at once. We even have to see whether these adapters for the ADSL and stuff like that would be identified now. Of that question, what routers support what? Now, okay, so those are the T1 adapters. Those may be handy in this. I was thinking just using the serial interface going through. Of course, none of these are in static wrap. The anti-static bags. The method to my madness was that I was just thinking of using serial adapters. And, it makes you wonder if any of the adapters with, in this instance, it'd be the 10 megabit per second Ethernet, of just whether that level is just not supported at the Cisco router. Really, in that sense, the token ring side of things is unchanged. Even though it has different chips and things like that as well. And what I wanted to try And I guess I wouldn't necessarily need to have this. And I'm even trying to remember the ordering that it does. Not that it really makes a difference either. Yeah, it'll definitely get hotter in the summertime. Okay, so this wick position is the 0 and the 1. I almost feel a little bit of deja vu going through these cards for some reason. Like I've done this before. And of course, back in the day, I used to work with some of these, the Cisco gear. So the thought is, and it wouldn't have made any difference really for where I pulled this adapter from. But the thought is I want to go through and try one of the wick cards on the older adapter. And we might as well, I mean, even though it's seated, I don't necessarily have to screw it in. I mean, that just makes sure that it's seated all the way in. And I'm pretty certain of that. Okay. So I wanted to see just a standard wick card. And of course, I had the machine powered, the router powered down. I want to see if this will run through the configuration again or not, or prompt me to run the auto. I think it'll prompt me to run the auto config, but whether it even saved that configuration at all, I don't think it did. Okay. We don't really have any. The lights came on for the adapter. Okay, and I didn't see even the prompts. So it does an inventory here. We're going to specify no. Okay. So return to get started. Okay, and it's reset to just the standard router prompt. So none of that configuration I did before went through and registered any level. When I do the enable prompt or type in the enable command, it doesn't prompt me for a password. I bet you I probably have to go through and reset that that router. Okay. So I'm going through, I just did a show run. Okay, so the gigabit 0 and 1, fast Ethernet 1/0, token ring. I don't see this WIC card interface identified at any level. So, you know, the light is on again here, but the, and what I should have done at the same time is I should have put that another WIC card in this for the fast Ethernet board. Let's go through and do that just to see the comparison of how those register, how those show up. Because I'm really believing that that older card It's just not going to be supported anymore. Okay. Okay, going through. Okay, with it inserted. And there's a light that comes on. Well, I'll have to see how those are once it's finished on if there's any indicators that show up for those at all. Okay. So again, we're going to specify no. Return to get started. It's going to probably go through and list all the interfaces being down. Okay, so we do see the serial. I'm going to do a show run. Oh, okay, I've got to go in enable mode first and then show run. Okay. The gigabit. Okay. So this with the in the card that's recognized, it shows that as that serial 1/0/1 for the position. And then there would be the serial 1 2 for that for a second card if that were in the other slot of that. So we can see that the serial boards are recognized for being in the supported adapter, and they're not shown in what appears to be a non-supported adapter. So that being a little bit of the troubleshooting that we can go through to kind of figure things out there. I'm going to go through and put the blockouts back in place. I know to go through and I can pull this adapter and yeah, I'm spending money and learning that is not supported on this router level. That's fine. We can go through and we can do it to that that way. We haven't still got into any of the level of setting up the bridge functionality, just going through and initially figuring out what cards are supported and things like that. But I got thinking too, John had brought up the sense that if there was the transparent bridging set up correctly, I don't even need my DHCP server, my NetFendi 7000 B88 DHCP server for the token ring, because that transparent bridging, it's going to assign addresses from my regular DHCP server on the Ethernet network. And see, that's the thing without these handles. That's what I was, this is my experience of, from earlier days, is that without the handles, you know, these feet on the bus connection inside lock in place, but going through to getting an adapter out, having that handle is a little bit nicer. That's why Cisco, I think, went to the point of having those, of using those later, just because the way that this locks into the bus. And I thought, you know, even if I wanted to put this in an upper slot, but that still has a metal frame down below that prevents me from normally going through and pulling this out. So we have two of our adapters now with the regular Ethernet, the 10 megabit per second, that we'll have to try in some other router. I'm going to go through, I'll get this into, I think this bag will be big enough. Get this into an anti-static bag and just basically storing this away. And getting the point where I can put the cover back on. I think, yeah, I've got the bar down. And I'll go through and just get a second one of the fast Ethernet modules. I'll look around to see what's available. And to put that in the router for doing that. And certainly I can go through and I can try the bridging from the 16 megabit per second token ring to the fast Ethernet with this. And then once that second card goes in, comes in, I can go through and do just replicate that to the 4 megabit speed. And that's just simply a speed setting for the adapter. We'll have to figure out what adapters those that goes in, though, the older interface cards. And like say I have the network cables and things like that. I could go through I went through the basic configuration before. Now, following my thought with the transparent bridging, and that's not using routing, because you have to, when you're talking about going between two different subnets, and the way I had my networks designed is I was going through and putting token ring on a separate subnet. Just like for my DHCP server, I had the interfaces are on my NetFendi 7000 Ethernet. It's pulling a DHCP address from my regular method of serving out IP addresses over the Ethernet network on the Ethernet side, but supplying IP addresses for the token ring networks, those being separate subnets. whenever you go through and to connect to different subnets, you have to have a router. And so that is not the same as transparent bridging. Transparent bridging, ultimately, the devices end up being on the same subnet. And that is a nice thing to have a lot of the time, too. I mean, you just have a device connect up to the network. It doesn't matter what interface it's using. It's on all that same subnet. And that might be a nice ideal in the end to have or to try for. But I may go through and trying to actually do routing as well. Both concepts sound interesting to me, because going through and having a structure, a separation between where Ethernet is on one subnet, token ring 16 megabit per second is on another subnet, and 4 megabit per second token ring is on yet another subnet. So I probably want to do the routing angle first, and that may be even more complex of setting up, and then going through to doing the transparent bridging, just having all devices, and even maybe in the end, the FDDI network, fiber connected cards, being on the same network as well, that transparent bridging. And so next week, I don't know. Again, I might want to try a stream or a video to install this ESA card on under network under Windows 2000. You know, dare to say whether we get into a part 3 for this, of going through and trying to get it to save the configuration and starting to figure out the routing steps that are required for this, and also to start looking at that transparent bridging level. And by that time, I can have that second board in there. Of course, bridging token ring, it's going to be a duplicate for the different speeds as well, the 4 megabit per second or the 16 megabit per second. I can start that with just one adapter in here on the Cisco router and just mimic that at the time that the second card comes in. So I think we have a plan here. I happened to kind of look at the clock. It might be nice for the last part. You know, we've been going, and certainly I was delayed late, so I haven't been going on the stream for quite an hour. Well, a little bit over an hour. And we might go through just to that register. If anybody knows that Cisco register that I need to write to. Okay. So, yeah. And so the smaller unit, this is the Cisco 3845 with the 4 slots. Now there's also the 3825, and that has just the 2 slots. The thought is that 3800 series Cisco, and then the 2 or the 4 being in that third digit position of how many of the larger slots it had. And I don't know what the last digit is of that, the 5 in that scheme, to where that's a revision level or anything like that. I don't think. But the 3800 series, that likely the 3825 would support the same adapters as the 3845 is the thought. So these so the cards, the support of that board with the regular Ethernet level, the 10 megabit per second, that's got to be some other router level of a little bit lower, 3600 maybe, or into the something of the 2000 level of the Cisco routers. I think I had a time. I think we had a 3600 level router that I at least one that I used in my workplace years and years ago. And of course, we never had any of the token ring side of things. But so as I say, just let's go through. I've got everything back really configured with that, just like we had at the start of the stream. Let's get the router going again here. And because I think it was a config reg, I had to see if there's a register value that I need to write in there to save away that configuration. And I'm interested in kind of getting to the point of these streams so that I can at least have initial configuration going and save to the device. We'll get it set to the right clock, everything else on these. I'll have to look at the board. I don't know how that NV RAM, maybe, it may not be saving the configuration for all that, for having a module that battery is out or something like that too. So let's do this. Just kind of thinking here a little bit. Let's go through. Let's not run through the configuration again. Let's go through the point of and certainly I can go through. I can pull the power cord. I'm interested in seeing what the main card. Of course, it has two retaining screws on either side, and then there's also these tabs on the side that these rotate out. I haven't done this before, and probably we need to, looking at this, the dust and everything else. But this is the main board of this 3845. Whether I think there's ultimately a slightly different board for the 3825. But just to see, I don't see any modules in there of where they have a battery or something like that. There may be more. I don't think that there's necessarily any other frame to that of saving away the config. I want to look at these a little bit more. Of course, people will, they'll be looking at the thought of the capacitors and things like that. You have jumpers in there of the boot default, dual UART default. Let me bring this up. And again, I'm trying to be very careful about the anti-static discharge. Interesting for all that of, one of these modules being populated for the RAM, and then having other slots that are available. There's the RAM module that's in there, assembled in the US. it does have LEDs that are lit. These may be visible through like through the back panel, or have a light, what they call the clear plastic tubes, that a light tube basically that goes through, and to make those visible for the diagnostic functions that they serve. Copyright 2004. Okay. But yeah, this is a little bit dusty, and it might be good being careful of anti-static discharge to go through and just to have this thing dusted off a little bit. Now there's an AMD, all these other ASICs in there are marked as like Cisco systems and stuff like that. There's a couple AMD chips in here as well. I want to look and, whether those are the main get reflections on my light ring. But might be interesting to see what level those are at. But that's the main board. Just looking at some of the clips there, that even I don't know if that's a coil or something else. I originally thought, hey, maybe that's like a non-volatile RAM holder there or something. I was just wondering that maybe to save away the configuration. And this, I understand with the time. Okay, so there is a little battery that's there. And I'm just thinking, especially for me programming the clock before and it not retaining the time, I wonder if that battery is just dead by now. And of course it is, it's not in a socket. It is where that is not at a, there would be some desoldering involved for the replacement of this. And I might look at that because, otherwise I can go through and I could have a config and put it on, but certainly powering the unit down, if I'm going through and losing the config every time, that's just something that I don't. I'd rather get it to where it would save the configuration and have a good battery in there. These are, I can go through and study too, to where these have that compact flash for the storage, and go through to look at the possibility of getting other compact flash modules. This is a 64 megabyte compact flash module. But just going through and having some of these parts and ability to work with this and have it to save the config would probably be nice. That's a little bit cleaner, just me running over the brush and we get to see some of the things that are there that maybe I can go through if there's a need to add more memory or things to that level, whether that's needed. Now, really, for the routing stuff, I would suppose that this is a very capable. Look at the guides. Yeah, there's not really any guides for the back. The two main connectors are off to the sides of this board, as we saw. But that seat's in there back pretty good. And I didn't see, and even reviewing the video, I want to make sure. Still seeing some. Of course, I could do a lot more better cleaning with a little bit of air and things like that too. So that is I may have to get on my other glasses just to. Those are reading. I even have. I've got my magnifier lenses around here somewhere too. Okay, so it's 3-volt lithium. There's not even a part number I can see. To know what replacement that I need to order. But it's a 3-volt battery. I could probably measure it because the lithium batteries are, the diameter and the thickness is how the battery part numbers are organized. But yeah, I'm interested in replacing that battery because I could go through all and that'd be the thing, because I would think that going through this initial configuration that it guides someone through, I would think that that'd be intuitive enough that if you complete the configuration, that initial configuration, that it would write it to memory, that you wouldn't have to go through and be concerned with register settings and things like that. Although that may be just those register settings may countermand everything as well for like a password reset and things like that. So yeah, but we definitely want to bring that board a little bit more up to date and get a replacement battery for it to because I want to make sure that it's able to save the configuration. I have even my voltmeter, and I could go through and I could check voltage on that and things like that. But I'll bet that battery is flat by now, especially for marking it as the initial copyright date of being in 20 years ago, and this machine not even being powered up or anything else over that span of time. So that's probably a good place. It looks like the stream's been running about an hour and a half. That's probably a good place. Yeah, and that's true, Russ. Going to since it's a 3-volt battery, going to a more conventional battery, and I'm sure that the Stern 2032 battery, which I have tons of anyway for other equipment, would last a lot longer. It has probably 4 times the mass of that little battery, and would last so much longer. And so getting in there, even the desoldering stuff that I would have to do for that holder, I can do that enough level to be non-destructive. And whether I could mount it on the PCB or have a, as you say, a short lead to be accessible from the underneath that main cover or something like that too. That's interesting because these things are so modular that it's interesting for the assembly on the other side that has the power switch that, as I flipped around the unit before, that has screws. In fact, let's go through. Just asking me if I want to disconnect. I'm going through and looking at the ability to go through, power down the ThinkPad here, get it a little bit out of the way to where, okay, I'll leave it connected to the token ring stuff, since I have the AC cord still disconnected on the other side. Let's get rotating this thing around. So, as I showed, I put the blockout back in place. I pulled that DC supply that I now have at my feet. So, and back when I bought the AC supply, and of course the DC supply was here originally. I bought this AC supply, put it in. I had the DC supply on this side. So I had gone through the point of pulling the cover. Now on these units, it's actually where it's got these 4 pieces, that you get worried the first time you go through this. And so maybe I'll be helping someone too, where these lever out. They're not where they pull or they detach in any form, but and they expose a Phillips head captive screw. Okay. And we have less viewers on this live stream. That's probably fine. Just a second go at this. I'm not, as you could view it, I'm kind of spinning my wheels. I could have gone through and been a lot more direct and gone through and initially pulled the board of these and talked about replacing that battery and other little things, or prior to a live stream going through and making sure I was had a unit enough to a level in demonstrating that I could quickly write a config out and everything else to stick to a video topic. But this sort of stream is a little bit more fun for me, and people could say I'm unprepared, but so this assembly comes off to get at of course, putting the power supplies in place, but it's a thick piece, and then it has the fans, and those go to that connector on the main board that we saw. And as you can see, we do have the light pipes, as Russ gave me the correct term. the clear plastic that goes through and is visible. So then it shows all the, this being effectively the front of the unit. If it were to be racked up, strangely enough, to have the power cord, and the indicator lights, and then you have all the interfaces, basically all the plugs for those on what's considered the back of the unit. But a little bit, different convention from kind of a switch sort of thing, in that once you got the router configured, of course, you wanted the interfaces hidden away, basically, or not, to where you're going through and adjusting those on a regular basis. But yeah, it may be possible to go through and even rather than tracking down the so-called correct part number for that battery, of just going through and me desoldering it, coming up with because I even have the CR2032 holders. I've got quite a few of those around, and I could even come up with something in this modular front assembly if I wanted to change the battery. Not that it's that hard to pull the card out as well from the other side, but the ability to go through and just pull this cover off. Of course, that shuts down the fans. I don't know really necessarily of. I thought that the way that they have it structured, because they have the two power supplies, that I think those power supplies are relatively hot swappable. The thought is that you could be in an environment to where having the one that's powered up, where it couldn't be powered down, having it in service, and so the power supplies, had gone bad, or one of the power supplies, in the case where you had a redundant supply, you could pull this cover that would turn off the fans for a moment, but going through and you could hot swap the power supply, and then put in a replacement, and be on your way. These power supplies have where they have the latching levers. They do have a handle. Here's the back that they have their fans of those. So that could be the thought, to where these are the power supplies are hot swappable. And another reason why the front is where you're plugging in power is kind of exposed in a way, to be able to get at the unit easily. You wouldn't have to de-rack it or anything like that, but going through and changing out the supplies. Certainly without the second redundant supply in there, there's a nice sized void that's in here as well on the unit. And I do intend to have to get the DC supply going as well. Just I was being bugged so much by it going through and repeating the messages that DC supply was down, that I thought I'd just go through and pull it was the easier option for me. So coming up on the time frame, and if I'd have started the stream at the right time, I would have been going 2 hours now. But I think that is a good place. Oh, okay. Yes. Good evening. And this the video will be available on replay. Once some time has elapsed. I'm not sure how long it takes YouTube to key that up anymore. But just as a review, again, we're not to the completed level where we don't have necessarily a config. I'm going through, I don't know if I need to necessarily retitle these videos, as it were, that not really necessarily getting the bridging set up, just a little bit of exposure, looking at the units and learning some things of what adapters are supported, which ones aren't, getting the right parts ordered, getting a configuration battery in there that's going to last me, and hopefully we'll go a little bit further. But it's a journey. It's all the steps that you go through in the journey. Not necessarily. I'm not going through and mapping it over the span of an hour of getting to a completed stage on this. So it's going to take maybe some more videos, more time to go through and get this running. But I do appreciate everybody tuning in. And I hope it's informative enough of just seeing the stuff and showing what I'm trying to set up, and a little bit of thought on that transparent bridging and the routing. And I want to go through for both ways. The routing setup may be more complex as it is, and going through and having to have more entries and of course using more of the processor functions. As I explained before, to me, the thought that Cisco in these adapters, that having an adapter like this that has both interfaces on it, I mean, this is designed for a bridge right off the bat. I mean, having it all self-contained, and really should have the functionality to do a bridge within the board itself, not even dependent necessarily on the host router. I mean, the host router may not really have to do all that much in a lot of situations for an adapter like this to be able to do a bridge. And that may be more of the nature that we had these routers for, that we had the fiber cards and things like that were a lot more intense probably for the routing purposes, and going through and accumulating those interfaces and putting it out over the fiber connection would have taken a lot more of the capabilities of this router. I think this 3845 is probably a very capable level of unit for what at least I'm trying to do. A little bit of overkill as it is, but so yeah, we'll get working with that. I should have realized I had the internal webcam image that was left up there, but that's fine. We get to see the delay between the two camera views. So looking over, and we had a moderate amount of comments and things like that as time went by, but I thank everybody for the input that they did. Yeah, the running config to the start config, and I tried that last time too. Last weekend, I had gone through after the stream ended and played around a little bit with it, and I was not able to get it to save that configuration that I did. I would think again that Cisco made it for that running that initial startup config for the layperson. That completing that, and where it tells you that it's writing that to memory, or writing that config. Now, that's stored in, and it talks about the NVRAM, and I'm sure that there's also the config level of that compact flash of something that's written to that image. and saved away for the time that even is not dependent upon the NVRAM of that battery and things like that. You have a configuration that's saved to that compact flash. Even the ability to go through and change out that compact flash with the unit powered down, of course, for maybe having different configs and things like that too. But I think it's ultimately that battery is impacting this a little bit. I would expect it's going to be drained. I have to figure out where I've got my voltmeter. I've got one around, and to go through and check the voltage on that, because I would think that battery is drained. So till next week, I haven't been turning out any videos during the week either. Just still going through and moving a lot of stuff around and not having necessarily the quote free time that I'd like to do videos. But at least I've got the live streams that I'm doing each on a schedule each week, and so we'll maintain that schedule at least. So I look forward to seeing everybody in a week again. Who knows for that topic of where we'll go, and whether we'll change this up a little bit to have some of the other things I want to attempt, especially with the FDDI cards. But that's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.